If you want to know what drives political parties' policy, it's the fundamental instincts of their leader and most of their MPs that are constantly on display in their responses to all the issues that typically come up. Now, we've seen it today in three key policy areas: wages, cost of living and economic development. Labor instinctively believes in more government action, while the coalition instinctively trusts you to know better than government for what's best for you and your family. Bigger government versus smaller government, more spending versus less spending, higher taxes versus lower taxes, more regulation versus less. Now, having tried to snooker Peter Dutton with its 70 cents a day tax cut last week, today Labor's bit of political theatre was to release its submission to the wages regulator, demanding a wage increase that's above inflation, and to insist that while Labor wants wages up, Peter Dutton wants wages down.
We want wage rises and tax cuts. Those opposite us want wages to go down and taxes to go up.
Now, all incredibly petty and transparent, especially when you consider that it's not the government that pays wages, or at least the wages of 70% of us who all work in the private sector. Business pays our wages. And unless that business that employs us is making a profit, we won't keep earning that wage, whatever the government or the Fair Work Commission might say about wages. So Dutton neatly sidestepped the government's trap today by saying that, of course, he supports higher wages, including above inflation wage rises, but that they had to be justified by higher productivity. And that meant ending restrictions on who could do what and the rules that make it harder for business, in particular small business, to make a quid. On display, as I said, the very different basic instincts of both sides. From Labor, it's government that should step in and run your life. From the coalition, it's your hard work, your drive that's likely to make the most difference to you and your family. Now, there were two coalition moves here as well, both reflecting the Liberal Party's instinct for smaller government, freer citizens, and the need for business to be allowed to get on with the job. Now, as I've been saying for years, eventually Labor's emissions obsession won't just put your power bills through the roof, it'll try and change the way you live. The climate fanatics don't just want more wind and solar power, they want to stop you flying, stop you driving the car of your choice, stop you eating meat, because all of these activities, so they say, are killing the planet. So Labor's got a scheme that from the middle of this year, will impose fines on car companies whose total sales don't result in progressively lower vehicle emissions. Under the energy clown, I call him the energy terrorist actually, Chris Bowen, car companies are supposed to sell more and more electric vehicles and fewer vehicles with a petrol or diesel engine, making it harder for Australians to buy the cars they want to drive, like the very popular Toyota Hilux and the Ford Ranger Ute. Now, naturally, Bowen, well, he's saying that these fines won't increase the cost of cars, even though 90% of car sales are not electric. It's about as believable as his claim that he'll cut $275 a year off your power bill.
Now, nobody's disagreeing with the fact that we need to have a clean vehicle emission standard, okay? Those vehicles are coming, but penalising car companies and directly driving up the price of cars is not the way to do it.
Now, the good news today, the coalition, if elected, they won't proceed with the fines, a relief for all of us under massive cost of living pressure. Also today, Peter Dutton said in an interview with my colleague Andrew Clennell, well, he said a lot, but I'll get to some of the other points in a moment, but on the issue of China, Dutton really took the gloves off and he pushed the PM pretty hard on his weak stand about yet another Chinese spy ship trawling our coastline.
The Prime Minister can't even stand up and explain his theory on why these surveillance ships are circumnavigating our country. This hasn't happened in this fashion before. I just think the Prime Minister is projecting weakness at the moment, which has never worked well over history. And so I do think there is an element of who do you trust to keep our country safe, both in a defence sense and also in a local law and order and crime sense at this election.
Especially in election campaigns, there's the daily political noise around gaffes, scandals and scares. Now, part of my job every night is to remind you of the fundamentals that drive both sides of politics. Because when crises come, as they do, it's inevitable, it's those essential instincts that decide the nature of our government's response, whether that's a good one or a bad one for our country.